Over the last 2 years, I have experienced a few moments where I questioned my sanity. I spoke with a couple different people in private and I told them I feel like I am going insane because our culture is changing at such a rapid pace so that things that were once black and white, right and wrong, you could clearly differentiate between a man and a woman. You were told to go out of your way to not judge someone by the color of their skin. Science was a process where you were encouraged to make up theories and test them and then challenge the scientific consensus of the day in search of truth. The church held the Bible as their final authority. And the bad guys in all of the action movies were secretly trying to resurrect communist empires. And now that is all gone. Every level of our society, from academia to the entertainment industry to corporations to the news to even many churches, are all pushing the same narrative that only a few short years ago would have seemed insane to everyone. And I felt insane watching it happen. Seeing all the illogical inconsistencies, the upheavals of our morals, and wondering why everyone else wasn't pushing back against what became known now as the woke movement. So for those who feel like maybe you're going insane sometimes as you watch our culture rush headfirst into Marxism, as your jaw drops to see homes and businesses burn down in acts of mostly peaceful protesting, the Babylon Bee has arrived on the scene to provide you with a renewed perspective in the Babylon Bee's Guide to Wokeness. Now, the Babylon Bee may not be the hero that any of us wanted for this time, with their biting and harsh, sarcastic form of humor, but they are the hero we need to stand up to our culture's dive into wokeness by shedding light on the craziness of the woke world. The Babylon Bee's Guide to Wokeness is a hilarious, step-by-step guidebook to teach you how to become woke. But this guidebook reminds those who still have sanity of the insanity of the woke movement. By using satire, the Bee sheds light, and that is much needed light, on how intersectionality pushes a racist mindset. The woke encourages segregation just like the KKK back in the 1950s. Feminism attacks women. Microaggressions are, well, they're just dumb. And follow the science has become a religion that works to destroy the scientific process. And I'm pretty sure while reading this book, I laughed out loud while reading it more than any other book that I have read since reading a book by Jim Gaffigan. I love how they define racism according to the woke, by pointing out that suddenly it's all the externals of your appearance that matter most, and not the character and individuality of each person. And then they write, you might be reading this and thinking, that seems a little racist. Well, you're wrong. We just recently changed the definition of racist to mean anyone who refuses to look at someone through the lens of race. Yup, the dictionary actually let us change the definition. Part of what has made me feel a little crazy during this time period has been those times where I'm looking and saying, they are really changing the definition of words. This form of newspeak is something I never expected to experience in my lifetime, and it made me feel a little insane to see it become reality. And I am glad that the Babylon Bee is here to point out what it is that the woke movement is doing. I think the portion of the book that I found most humorous was the section on Columbus, on how Columbus desecrated America by filling it with Christian fundamentalist homeschoolers who brought this land homophobia and Liberty University, and then the Pilgrims established the racist holiday of Thanksgiving, where everyone who dined denied science by refusing to wear masks. And I think along the way, Christopher Columbus was trying to set up a lot of olive gardens too. So Columbus and the Pilgrims ruined this land for all of us. And I gotta say, there was just so much good stuff in all of this book, and I feel like I would just ruin the jokes by reading them to you. But I want to talk for a moment to anyone who feels like satire is not a Christian response to wokeness. That it's just too harsh, it's something that Jesus would never encourage people to do, so you shouldn't read Babylon Bee articles, and especially don't buy a Babylon Bee book. There are several times in the Bible when the prophets and even Jesus himself used biting humor to expose either the sins of Israel, God's own people, or the enemies of the people of God. In Isaiah 44, 9 through 20, Isaiah tells the story of an idol maker who chops down a tree and uses half of the wood to craft an idol, and then he burns the other half of the tree in order to warm himself and cook food. He burns half of it in a fire, and he roasts meat on that half. He eats the roast and is satisfied. He warms himself and says, "Ah, I am warm. I see the blaze." He makes a god or his idol with the rest of it. He bows down to it and worships. He prays to it, "Save me, for you are my God." Such people do not comprehend and cannot understand, for he has shut their eyes so they cannot see, and their minds so they cannot understand. Isaiah's story is biting satire humor, very similar to the Babylon Bee's work, as God's prophet is attempting to wake up Israel to how crazy it is that they are worshiping gods of wood and stone. And then we have Elijah in 1 Kings 18, who has a standoff with the prophets of Baal to see which god can call down fire from heaven first. And in the midst of the contest, Elijah is mocking the prophets of Baal by giving them advice on how to get their god's attention, or maybe reasons that their god is too busy to send down fire from heaven. And again, that advice that Elijah gives is right in line with what we have in the Babylon Bee's Guide to Wokeness. And then we have Jesus in one of his condemnations of the Pharisees in Matthew 23. Jesus mocks the Pharisees as being whitewashed tombs. That means they were clean on the outside, but they were dead on the inside. And this was really harsh because Jesus was using their own practice of honoring the prophets to go after their hypocrisy. Now, those three examples show that what the Babylon Bee is doing is not outside the realm of what we find in the Bible. But what the bee is doing is they are pointing out and drawing attention in a bold way to the illogical inconsistencies and the just plain sinfulness of the woke movement. I just take the transgender community as an example. Right now, the transgender community is encouraging teen girls to bind their breast, ruin their fertility and testosterone treatments, and then even go as far as mutilating their bodies by cutting off their breasts. And our society is acting like this is a good and wonderful thing. Self-mutilation is not good. And so we need hard-hitting satire to shine the light on how terrible this stuff is. And that is what the Guide to Wokeness does. We need to remember, Marxism has killed 100 million people over the last 100 years. And they have enslaved and tortured countless more. The only thing that wokeism is the current 21st century version of Marxism. And so we need to use every tool that we have to combat it, whether it's Owen Strachan's Christianity and Wokeness, Scott David Allen's Why Social Justice is Not Biblical Justice, in order to confront this foe. But we also need the Babylon Bee's Guide to Wokeness to help people see how crazy this entire movement is. And maybe this book will open up the eyes to people who will not sit down and read Live Not by Lies by Rob Dreher. So I encourage you, grab your copy of the Babylon Bee's Guide to Wokeness. It's funny, it's important, it even mocks a kids show that I wouldn't let my children watch simply because it's annoying. If you want to know what else to read on the issues of justice beyond the Babylon Bee's Guide to Wokeness, check out my Justice playlist on my Rev Reads YouTube channel. I have about a dozen books that I have reviewed on there, including the original book on wokeness, which is the Communist Manifesto. And then subscribe to my channel in order to find more insight into the world of Christian literature, to know and live God's standard of righteousness and justice in this world.